4x4 Muncie main shaft. And looks like an adapter. Kind of goes like this. I've been waiting to build one of these for a really long time. It's an Advanced Adapters 4x4 Muncie conversion kit. Let's get to it. So before you begin doing one of these Advanced Adapters conversions, it's a good idea to pre-fit all the case sections. This is a two-piece conversion. You have this adapter housing that takes place of your extension housing, and it goes to your mid plate, and it goes to your main case. And this one here is going to be another housing that goes on here that adapts to the Dana 18 transfer case for the Jeep. So what I like to do first is I like to make sure that there's no air gaps and that everything is fitting nice and smooth and dropping down into place. And also making sure that I can get fasteners in here correctly. One of the problems with this Advanced Adapter setup is that they don't realize that you can't stick a bolt in here. This gets in the way. If you look over here, you got this bolt here, you will never be able to get in. So what you got to do is you got to put a stud in here and make a stud. And the stud is going to be 3 1/4 inches long to fit in here. Then you can get on here with a nut and tighten it that way. Otherwise, the rest of the Muncie bolts will work fine. But this thing is raised because they actually mount the shifter in these locations right over here, a special shift bracket for her shifter. So what I also do is I pre-fit the adapter housing and put the studs on it and everything and make sure that it's dropping down into place perfectly, like this, okay? So these studs, I don't know if you could see, were way too long and they were actually hitting this casting over here and making this piece cock up like this. So I had to cut the studs down to a length of 2 1/4 inches. So when you're assembling the transfer case onto here, at least you'll be able to catch your lock washers and nuts on here. And then there's some other bolts that'll go on here in this area here. And if you notice, I've got some paint on here where I've been kind of seeing where the indexing goes for this. But that's what I do. I pre-fit everything first. And then the next step is I'm going to do is I'm going to ream this out to put the later auto gear shifter shafts on here. And then what I'm going to do is probably put a vent hole right over here because I'm running a sealed system. So I use a thrust button auto gear case. So then I spot face all the mounting ears of the case so that the lock washers and nuts get a nice solid true surface to bite against. On the back side of the case, I drill these 2 vent holes. And so when I put the mid plate on, air has a way to kind of come through and go into the extension housing because there's going to be a sealed bearing over here and there's going to be oil covering this over here. So I want a way to balance both cavities and equalize the pressure in both cavities. So I always drill 2 vent holes, and I love the fact that this casting has these little recesses in here which allows you to drill holes and ventilate both cavities properly. So this is a 751 thousandths reamer, and I'm going to do this by hand. I kind of ground the reamer a little bit so that I can get it started in the hole. And be very careful that I don't mess this hole up and do it very slowly. And I'm applying downward pressure on the reamer over here. And so the auto gear shifter shafts are slightly oversized to compensate for worn bores and factory side covers, but these are new pieces, so they have a tendency to be tight and not going to fit in correctly. Now that I've reamed this out, I have a nice fitting shifter shaft in the bore. I want you to take notice of something. On the Muncie extension housings, there is a stop here to prevent this from going too far. But you have to be careful on the Advanced Adapters piece because you can actually push the shifter shafter in and it'll disconnect from the ball that way, where it doesn't really do that on a Muncie. So you can actually pull this out too far and it will disconnect. So you must be very careful that when you're assembling this, that you don't pull on this because you'll pop the ball and spring out while the whole transmission is together. Something to think about. It's one thing I don't like. I wish there was a washer or something I couldn't put behind this to prevent that from happening. But what's going to happen is we're going to assemble this with the reverse gear and inside here because we're going to have a stud coming over here. And so there's no way that we can kind of wiggle it down. So we're going to have to drop this straight down on the transmission. Create a center punch mark 1.4 inches from this flange area on the center of the casting. What I do is I start a pilot hole first and then gradually bring the hole up to size for the tap. This way I get a nice clean shaped hole and it's not elongated. These are kind of hard to hold in a vise. So I like to drill the hole so that the 1/4-inch pipe tap is just able to start at the very top of it. This way I can gradually bring the tap in and kind of then take it out and then put the fitting in and try to get the fitting at the right height where it seals correctly, but it's not protruding into the inside of the cavity over here. This is what I want to show you. So I kind of gradually bring the tap in just a little at a time. Then I'll take it out and fit the vent in to see where I'm at. I got a ways to go. I got about another 1/8 of an inch to go. So you do this a little at a time because you don't want to, with a pipe tap you can over tap it and then make the thread too loose, because this is a tapered thread and it relies on the interference fit of the threads tightening up on the taper for it to seal properly. So if I make it too loose, then the vent isn't going to seal and we're going to have oil come out of the threads. It's nice and tight. And this is flush inside over here. That's what you want to do. By the way, I'm just putting this vent on here because this is a street application right now. But if this person decides to go off-roading and is going through mud or going through, water, you may want to put a barbed 1/4-inch pipe fitting on here and run a vent tube up higher alongside the firewall. Because what you don't want to do is go through water and submerge this thing and then have water go into the transmission through the vent and then take out the gearbox. But at least you got a 1/4-inch pipe connector now that you can even go to Home Depot and get a regular 1/4-inch barb fitting and attach a hose to it and run it up to your firewall and then put this vent cap into the hose up on the top. What you got to do is you got to make a stud that's 3 1/4 inches long. It's a 3/8 16 threaded stud, because Advanced Adapters does not supply a stud in their kit, and it's very essential in getting this whole unit to come together easily. And that stud is going to go in this position over here, like this. So now I've got the mid plate and the extension housing together, and I want to be able to make sure that I've got enough room to put a flat washer, a lock washer, and a nut on this section over here. So unlike regular Muncies, you start this assembly a little bit different. Take some grease on the reverse detent spring and put it in the extension housing here. Add a little grease to the ball, kind of hold it in place like that. Then you're going to slide the reverse shifter shaft in the transmission. And I use this kind of pry bar and I get underneath it and hold the ball down. See, now if you push it in too far, the ball is going to come out, okay? So be very careful that you don't want to do exactly what I just did. I just wanted to show you what goes on. Now it makes it easy to pop it in that way too, okay? But it's going to have to kind of be in the middle. So that, again, if you push it this way, the ball is going to come out. So you have to be very careful how you place this. I put some sealant on the pin. It's a tapered pin. It comes in your small parts kit. Now the shaft is locked. It can't go in and out anymore. Now again, normally you wouldn't do this building a regular Muncie extension housing, but because there's no speedometer gears, it works fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just checking the detent action, making sure it's okay, which it is. Once the reverse shifter shaft is locked into place, you could put the seal in now. I use an old socket. And I put a little sealant on the outside edge of the seal. These new shifter shafts are keyed for the old stud type, but they come with bolts. And if you have later linkage arms, you could use the adapters that are These kind of adapters go in here like this. They are used to convert from the bolt-on style shifter shaft to the stud type shifter shaft. But these take a 5/16 fine threaded bolt on them. I like just to put everything in place so the hardware is there and it doesn't get lost. Now what I can do is I can flip it over like this. Right, I can put the reverse shift fork in there. And I kind of tilt the fork up like this. I slide the gear in and lower it into place. And we're going to drop this whole assembly on the transmission main shaft and mid plate when we're ready to go. So this whole assembly is ready to go now. A lot of gears don't have oil reliefs cut into the thrust surfaces of the gear. It's very important that any transmission you rebuild, you have to make sure that these oil reliefs, and they can't be on center, they have to be off center or ground into the gear. For some reason, they put them on these gears, but they forget to machine them on the 3rd-speed gears. It's quite a common issue. So I always grind these reliefs into the gears if need be. So what you want to do is you want to grind flats on the shaft like this. This allows oil to circulate around in and out of the gear rather than pile up and heat up. So flip it 180 degrees and we're going to grind flats again on both sides like this. Without having the relief, as I mentioned over here, oil can't go around and circulate. So it tends to heat up, and then these areas tend to seize up and get hot spots. I've shown how to assemble one of these in my book on Muncie 4-speeds, which you can look at the link in the description of this video. But the gear train goes together like any normal gear train, except obviously the main shaft is different because it's got the spline here for the Jeep 4x4 conversion. This is an M22Z gear set, so it's a modular counter gear. You can see the snap rings in here that hold it in place. On the M22Zs, you can actually put the counter gear in the case first because the input shaft is very small and it will slide up over it into the cluster, and the bearing is kind of a slip fit onto the main drive gear. What you want to do is you want to slide the 3/4 slider onto the input shaft, but you have to be careful because on the M22Z, which has got the 298 first gear, this slider can come off completely. So you want to just kind of put it about like this, almost right before where the keys are ready to pop out over here. Alright, I'm using my red line gaskets on this assembly. Nice thing about this is you don't have the weight of the reverse gear on the main shaft, but you have to be careful how you grip it. And again, there's no front bearing in here, so the input shaft can fall out of it. But you just want to catch everything and lay it right down like that. Unfortunately, we can't take advantage of the bolt-on counter shaft to the mid plate because there's not enough room on the advanced adapter housing to have a bolt over here. But because we got the thrust button case, the shaft really can't come forward anyway. So I've got the reverse idler shaft, and reverse idler thrust washer all together. I'm going to fish it through the case and engage the forward reverse idler. And you want to kind of keep this at, straight up and down, 12 o'clock position. Now the whole trick is to lay that whole assembly back down on this. So we got to put that stud in first, very crucial. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch this reverse gear. You can actually see the fork for the reverse gear over there onto the main shaft, and then slide the whole assembly down and catch that stud as well. And I also have to catch that reverse idler shaft. That's really nice and perfect. Now, Advanced Adapters does give you a longer bolt for this area over here. And you use regular stock length bolts for the rest of the area. So this area over here on the top is too tight for a regular lock washer. So I use what's called a high collar lock washer over here just to sneak that bolt in there. So you can see the setup. High collar washer over here. Nut and washer over here on the stud. The extra long bolt they gave you from Advanced Adapters. Regular stock bolts over here. Another stock bolt over here. Another stock bolt over here. Broken tool. This is my Craftsman torque wrench. I don't understand how they can build crap with plastic handles like this. This plastic piece broke. Why would you put a plastic collar on a torque wrench? If you at all bump this wrench or drop it, you crack the collar. Even my old steel one broke because the inside of it snapped somehow. Obviously, this is not an endorsement. By the way, most of these bolts are impossible to get through with a socket because they're so close to the case. I wish Advanced Adapters would mill out recesses over here so that you can get full sockets on these, but there's no way to get in here on the back side here. It's very close, so you have to use an open end wrench to tighten some of these, okay? Same thing over here, next to impossible to get a socket on this one. This one, you may be able to get a short socket over here. This one you can. This one you can. This one, same thing, you really can't. You got to use an open end wrench on it. The front bearing on the M22Z can kind of just tap in. It's not a tight press fit at all. You put the spacer on, put the snap ring on. Again, here's another shot of my red line gaskets I'm using today. I put some sealant to tack it in place. Sealant on these bolts. You want to torque these to 25 foot-pounds. And this part of the wrench works okay. This little plastic piece is broken. First you want to torque to 15 foot-pounds with the red lines. Then bring it up to 25 foot-pounds. Since this is a new M22Z Jeep transmission, I'm using the new side covers with the bronze oil-light bushings in them. And also the shifter shafts have a TIG welded end on them. One thing that I do is I straighten out the shift combs on these covers because they're a little bit out of shape when they heat treat them. And I add some additional spacers to tighten up the whole comb mechanism in it. As with any Muncie, I have the transmission in second gear and the shift cover in second gear. Side cover bolts get torqued down to 18 foot-pounds, but I run them in with the gun first. So this is the new Muncie 4-speed complete with the Dana 300 adapter onto it. Now I wanted to show you what the spud shaft looks like for the Dana 1820 transfer case and the adapter plate as well. So I've driven the seal in here and I've already pre-mounted the studs for the customer. This will go on the transfer case and then it will bolt to the transmission. But let me show you how it works. It'll go on there like this. This ring will go on like this. Notice the seal over here, and then the spud shaft will go in and it'll lock in like that. Well, that was a fun build. Using that brand new M22Z with the 298 first gear, with that Advanced Adapters conversion for the Dana 300 transfer case, it will give the ultimate Jeep 4-speed combination for heavy duty use. And with that extra little adapter plate, you can bolt up a Dana 18 or a Dana 20 transfer case. Very cool combination. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe.